The United States military struck targets all across the Islamic Republic for the second night in a row. And on the other side, the Revolutionary Guards announced that they attacked American bases in Kuwait, Bahrain, and Jordan. 3 soldiers and 3 sailors were killed in a deadly American strike in the Hormuz area against a tanker that was on its way to Iran. Iran warns President Trump that an agreement cannot be achieved through threats. And at the same time, Tehran is making it clear that the Strait of Hormuz is closed until further notice. The new crisis. Hezbollah recently carried out a move that has never happened before. And despite the exchange of strikes between the United States and Iran during the middle of the night, the negotiations between Washington and Tehran continue. And today, the President of the United States reveals that the United States moved more than 200 ships to the Strait of Hormuz without Iran knowing about it. All the details coming in this report. So in the United States, are they really preparing for a major strike in Iran? Let me know what you think. And what are the signs that are pointing to the fact that something big is about to happen? I'm Yair Pinto. With me is Mati Shoshani. We are here on Boots on the Ground. We bring you the full truth about what is happening here in Israel and also the full truth about what's happening in our neighborhood in the Middle East. Today is June 11, and this is the second day since the opening of the United States fighting against Iran. So let's begin. Because Tehran is furious over the American decision to return and to strike on its territory because of the delay in the progress of the negotiations. But despite the fire, both sides have still not given up on the chance of reaching an agreement. After the President of the United States, Donald Trump, he warned Tehran that it would pay a price if it continued to drag out these negotiations. And the United States Central Command launched another wave of strikes inside Iran. This time, it was wider, more organized, and above all, clearer. Not a strike for a headline, but an attempt to dismantle the eyes, the ears, and the hands of the Iranian regime along the coast. And according to reports, Tomahawk missiles were launched from the sea, including from the American destroyer USS Michael Murphy. Trump and foreign reports spoke of 49 such missiles. And at the same time, aircrafts and also platforms from the air, from the Navy, and from the Marines struck additional targets using precision munitions. The targets were radar systems, observation communications, and command and control, and also air defensive systems, meaning everything that Iran needs in order to see an attack coming, coordinate a response, and then try to hit the American forces in return. All vessels in the Gulf were destroyed. So the centers of the explosions once again brought us back to southern Iran. Bandar Abbas, Qasem Island, Sirik, and Minab area, and the coastline that is facing the Strait of Hormuz. This is not just a list of names. This is Iran's neck facing the world. From there, it tries to threaten the oil, the shipping, the American forces, and, in effect, the global economy. That's why the American message was simple. You want to turn Hormuz into a bargaining chip? We will begin dismantling the infrastructure that allows you to pay that card. Iran, of course, tried to respond quickly so it would not appear humiliated. The Revolutionary Guards claimed that they attacked American targets in Bahrain, Kuwait, and Jordan. There were reports of sirens, interceptions, and temporary closures of airspace. In Jordan, it was claimed that missiles aimed at the El Azraq base were intercepted. But as of now, there is no reliable picture of heavy strategic damage to the American forces. And that is really the story of this night. Iran fires in order to film a response. The United States strikes in order to change the balance. Trump does not want a full war. He wants a deal. But he also understood that the Iranians are buying time, testing limits, and trying to hold the Strait of Hormuz as a hostage. So tonight he sent them a message. We can talk at the negotiating table, but if not, this night could repeat itself tomorrow as well. The maritime arena in the Persian Gulf is burning. The United States attacked a tanker suspected of violating the blockade on Iran. 3 Indian sailors were killed. India announced that 3 Indian crew members were killed in an American attack on an oil tanker in the Gulf of Oman, which Washington said has violated the blockade of Iran on Iran. And following the incident, a senior official at the United States Embassy in New Delhi was summoned for a clarification meeting, and India delivered a strong protest over this event. The President of the United States revealed that his military is secretly securing the movement of ships in the Strait. According to him, in a secret operation over the past month, more than 100 million barrels of oil and more than 200 commercial ships passed through the Strait of Hormuz under the American security. This is a secret operation carried out by the United States military in order to ensure freedom of navigation in the area. Trump claimed that Washington controls the Strait of Hormuz, not Iran. Following the American strikes, the Supreme Command of the Revolutionary Guards announced that Iran had completely closed the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranians threatened that any vessel that tries to pass through the strait would be attacked. This is including oil tankers and commercial ships. It was also stated that 2 vessels that tried to cross the strait were attacked. The Revolutionary Guards also threatened that Iran's armed forces would respond in a crushing and decisive way to any aggression by the United States in this area. On Iranian state television, it was reported that in response to the American strikes, Iran attacked forces of the United States Fifth Fleet in the Bahrain area using drones. However, U.S. Central Command stated that the strait was not closed and that no American ships were attacked. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, told Fox News, "If the Iranians do not sign an agreement, we will bomb the hell out of them once more tonight." And despite the exchange of fire between the American military and Iran, a senior American diplomatic official said this morning that the negotiations are still continuing. This comes after Donald Trump said, even during the strikes, that he had spoken directly with Iranian officials and added, "They asked me to stop bombing." The United States attacked the engine room of the oil tanker MT Stibello, which it said tried to break the blockade on Iran. And following the strike, the representative of the American embassy in Delhi was summoned for a clarification meeting with a strong protest. Just on Monday, U.S. Central Command attacked another tanker that had 24 Indians on board. So I want to update that the negotiations between the United States and Iran for an initial agreement are moving forward despite the ongoing exchanges of fire. Iranian sources told the Reuters news agency that the sides have already reached understandings in principle, but several issues are still being discussed. Amongst these issues are the mechanism for releasing frozen Iranian assets abroad worth tens of billions of dollars. And while the Gulf is burning, Hezbollah's strongest base has simply broken, and an unimaginable move has already begun. Could the Iran-United States war also reach American soil? Despite the war against the United States that is taking place in the Middle East, the Iranian regime has decided to send its players to the World Cup, and there is a good chance that they will face the American team. So a lot is ahead of us, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, with me is Mati Shoshani, and we are here on Boots on the Ground. We bring you the full truth about what is happening here in Israel and about the war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. In 1 second before we begin, I want to call on you to keep spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. Click on the subscribe button. Most importantly, do not forget to look for me, Yair Pinto, and for Mati Shoshani on our social media accounts to get a look through our eyes at what it's like to live here in Israel under this war. So, our senior Middle East correspondent, Mati Shoshani. Are the American strikes in the Strait of Hormuz only a specific response or an attempt to dismantle the maritime blockade and blackmail mechanism which Iran built this entire campaign?
Yes, but we're living in a bit of a confusing time right now, and let me try and explain what's actually happening here. We're in this bizarre in-between period between when the real full-on war ended and when the war will, well, or conclude in an agreement or go back to exchanges of fire. And right now we're in the middle of that, where the Iranians are trying to figure out what the US and Israel are willing to do, and what Israel and Iran, or Israel and the US, sorry, are showing the Iranians what they are willing to do in return, in response to that. And this is an important phase, because right now we're shaping the relationship as it's going to look very likely for weeks and possibly months ahead of us. And there's an important thing that's happening right now that isn't static. We're not at all in a stuck position right now. We're fighting a war that is a war of attrition, at the end of which the Iranian regime will or crack and be replaced, or will sign an agreement. That's the best case scenario. There is a worst case scenario, which has happened in the past, by the way, against Iran, where those who are fighting against Iran, the United States and others, in the past it was a non-conventional war, as in a quiet war, where they signed bad agreements with Iran. But hopefully we don't get to that point. Hopefully where we're going is a good agreement with Iran, and I'll get to that in a second, or full-on military pressure and conflict on them. Why is that? If you watch this channel repeatedly, in recent weeks you've heard several times from different experts the same repeated message regarding the Iranian regime. They're weaker now than they were before. They are split. They speak in separate voices. You have components within the IRGC, the hardcore leadership of the Revolutionary Guards, who want a holy war, who want to see the Middle East burn down, to go up in flames. And there are others in the government, others in Iran, who want a much more moderate path of action, who want something like an agreement, who say that they shouldn't continue fighting. Those two parts are not in agreement. They're fighting against each other. We're just not privy to those conversations happening. We just see here and there the symptoms of them take place. What we're seeing right now is Israel and the United States, and especially when it comes to President Trump, responding very strongly to these probes by the Iranians. The Iranians are trying to see, can we fight against the US? Can we weaken US allies? Can we attack Gulf states and get away with it? And they've received a very clear message in missiles, in fire, in financial pressure on them that says the following: if you mess with us or our friends, the response is coming. Today and every day. What we've seen in recent nights is exactly that. It is a bold, clear response from the US to the Iranians saying, if you think you're going to be able to shape this game, you're wrong. We are the ones shaping the game. You are the ones on the losing side of this equation, on a military level and on a financial level. And the faster you wake up to that reality, the better the life for you, the leadership of Iran, will be. And in the intermediate period, where we are right now, there's an ongoing saga where Iran is trying to find their way, finagle their way out of the very unpleasant situation that they're in. And the US and Israel, repeatedly in recent weeks, but specifically in this last week, have shown them that their attempts to go back to a status quo where they hold the Strait of Hormuz hostage, where they're using their proxies, specifically Hezbollah, to fight against Israel, and they can get away with that, that reality no longer exists in this world. And when they attack, through proxies or directly, there is a strong response that is painful to them. All the while, the financial pressure on Iran continues. The military blockade, the financial blockade on them continues. And hear me when I say this, there is more up the sleeve of the American armed forces that they have not yet used against Iran that can cause further pain, further unpleasant situations, further friction for them in the future that will force them to eventually or change regime one way or another, but more likely come to some kind of agreement that is agreeable for the US. But I said in the opening of this segment, Israel and the United States can live without an agreement. An agreement will be easier, especially for the Trump administration, but we can live without it. And that is a reality Iran needs to contend with and learn to live with.
Mati, is Iran now in a decision-making crisis even deeper than the military crisis because there may be no single figure in the Tehran abilities in the whole of Iran that is capable of signing a historic concession without being seen as a traitor to the revolution?
The equation between the Israeli Air Force, the American Air Force, and the Iranian adversary has been pretty much the same since the beginning of the war. In the most clear, the most obvious way, Iran and its friends in the region are militarily inferior to the power of the US and Israel. And let me explain that. When it comes to being able to stop a strike by the Israeli Air Force or the American Air Force, the Iranians don't have the ability. They do have air defense systems, but they are inferior to what we have as far as attack capabilities. They do have the ability here and there to harm aircraft. As we've seen, they knocked down a Apache helicopter sometime just in this last week, an American one, but that happens in war. That doesn't mean that they have the upper hand. The reality is they keep trying to rebuild their air defenses every time there's a substantial strike and then a break afterwards. But ultimately, their systems are inferior. In this last round, between what happened several months ago and now, the Iranians have brought in additional air defense systems that they purchased, according to certain sources, from the Chinese, mobile air defense systems. And yet, Israel and the United States can punch through their air defenses. And something needs to be said here. Air defenses and the ability to stop a foreign invader from flying through your skies, it's not this simple equation of, do I have the system or do I not have the system? These systems work in tandem. They work together. They require skilled operators. They required a deep knowledge base behind them. And on the attacking side, there's a huge component to how you are able to use military deception and other tools. Recent stories that have come out about the beginning of this war back in February and how Israel was so effective in striking in Iran, by the way, also last year in Operation Midnight Hammer, Am Kelavi in Hebrew, Rising Lion in Israeli terms. Last year, there was a story that came out that said that Iranian trained Mossad operators were the ones who helped knock out some of the communication nodes and air defense systems in Iran. To make a long story short, Israel and the United States have air superiority over Iran. It's a question of what targets we want to strike, not whether or not we can strike them. Now, again, in the military game, there always is risk. There might be a day, and I hope it doesn't come, that an Israeli or an American aircraft is knocked down over Iran and the pilots don't make it out. So far, several have been hurt, but they've all made it out alive, even with the substantial military operation to carry them out. So there is a risk. But overall, when you look at the grand scheme, the macro level of this conflict, Israel and the United States always have air superiority above Iran. And then it's a question of what targets do we want to strike, not whether or not we can strike those targets. That is the important thing to remember here. And the United States and Israel have an enormous list of additional targets we can hit in Iran. Electricity grid, infrastructure related to the petrochemical industry, much of it, wells. I mean, this goes on and on and on. We've been restraining ourselves, Israel and the United States, up to this point because it is the right thing to do right now. Again, I want to remind you, our war is not against the people of Iran, not at large. It's against the Ayatollah regime of Iran that has taken those people hostage. That is important to remember, important to note. And as we move on with this war, here and there we're going to see these flare-ups as we did in this last week, where Israel and the United States attack strategic targets in Iran. That doesn't mean we can't attack other targets. It's that we're choosing to attack these ones at this time. Now let's talk about the Iranian perspective in all of this for just a second. They've lost a lot of face in front of their people. Their people now know very clearly that when Israel and the United States want to fly undisturbed over their skies, we have the ability to do so day in, day out, in daytime, at low altitude, and almost unchallenged by Iranian air defenses. That damage has already been done. The prestige of the Iranian army, the prestige of the Iranian air defenses, that has already been knocked out by multiple Israeli and American strikes, both of the Iranians internally and externally. And more importantly, there's also the question of the other systems, the Russian, the Chinese systems that are integrated in the Iranian air defenses. There too, there has been a dramatic, just decline of perception of value of these systems in the eyes of both Iranian people and the international community. Where does that take us? It takes us to a situation where people in Iran have to think that any target is game if the US and Israel want to strike it. And they need to calculate that, knowing full well that they will not be able to stop the next strike when it happens. So when people say that Trump's hands are tied, he can't negotiate with the Iranians, or that there's nothing more that Israel can do in Iran, just think about this. Pretty much any target anywhere in Iran is permeable to American and Israeli strikes. We might not be able to destroy a bunker hundreds of feet under the ground, but most on-ground surfaces are fair game for the Israeli and American strikes. And that's the situation now and will be also in the future as we maintain air superiority and damage their air defenses as they try to redeploy them in these breaks between attack cycles.
And Mati, does Israel's shift from Lebanon back to Iran as the main arena meant that Jerusalem understood that the path to dismantle Hezbollah is no longer through southern Lebanon, but through weakening the landlord in Tehran, which is the Revolutionary Guards?
Yair, I love that question because it goes straight to the core of how the Iranians operate. Their entire methodology, their defense doctrine for decades has been the ring of fire, warfare through proxies, deterrence through proxies. They set up, they funded, they trained, they equipped Hezbollah, the biggest terrorist organization on earth in recent decades. They trained them to the tune of billions of dollars per year. They trained up Hamas. They've spent a fortune on trying to indoctrinate and create terrorism cells within Judea and Samaria and also in many other countries around the world. They've done the same with the Houthis, and they've tried to do so also elsewhere in the world. Why do they do that? Because Iran looked at the proxies as an insurance card, a policy against Western attacks or American Israeli attacks on Iranian soil, because of the knowledge that when those countries want to attack Iran, the proxies will rain down fire on other countries. What's happened in recent years is that Hezbollah is no longer the same threat it was in the past because Israel has been fighting against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hamas is no longer a threat to Israel because of this 2.5-year war. Hamas is a fraction, a shell of what it used to be, barely existent compared to its forces in past years. The same applies to the Houthis, who've taken a substantial beating. They're not destroyed, but they've taken a beating from American attacks and some, to a lesser degree, Israeli attacks in recent years. What does that mean? That means that the Iranian ability to threaten other countries with a retaliation from the proxies is worth less now than it was in the past. That's the big takeaway from this entire conversation. And what happens because of that? Israel and the United States attack in Iran anytime they want without any real fear of retaliation from the proxies. Here and there, some missiles come out. But look, Iran in its grand attack against Israel when it was trying to create this line in the sand over Israeli attacks in the Dakhia in Lebanon, where Israel is, essentially eliminating the leadership and the command centers of Hezbollah in a very systematic manner. Iran tried to stop Israel and threatened to attack. They launched 23 to 24 ballistic missiles that night, earlier this week. And in that attack, what happened? The Houthis in Yemen launched 2 ballistic missiles. That was the great attack that came out of Houthis. This vast proxy that's well equipped by Iranian, the best of their ballistic missiles and training, etc., was barely able to affect anything in this last campaign. And that shows you the level of weakness that Iranian proxies have experienced. And because of that, their ability to deter Israel or the United States is much lesser. Not only that, Israel and the United States have learned a lesson, and we're looking at the system as one big chunk, one big piece. And we say openly, we want to take away that weapon from Iranian hands. We're going to eliminate their ability to harm Israel through Hezbollah, and we're doing it right now in Lebanon. We will eliminate their ability to do it through the Houthis. You saw American operations over a 2-year period in Yemen against Houthi targets to do exactly that. And we've seen the same when it comes to Hamas in the Gaza Strip. So Iran's doctrine has failed. They thought they would be able to deter Israel and the United States indefinitely. That hasn't been working anymore. We strike with impunity within Iran, time and time again, without fear of their retaliation through their proxies. And hear me, guys, we're not done yet. By the time this war is over, Hezbollah will be very little compared to what it used to be. It will be a fraction, a fragment of the fighting force they used to be. And Israel will never again forget the lesson we learned on October the 7th and allow Hezbollah terrorists to inhabit the border regions of northern Israel. That is a new reality in the Middle East. That is a new status quo in the Middle East. Iran will never again be allowed to deploy proxies in the way they did in the past. Take note of Israeli actions, of American actions in recent months to see how far we're willing to go to eliminate the Iranian proxy ability. What used to be will no longer be. Iran will no longer be able to threaten through proxies. Israel has taken note, as has the US, and we will continue to fight those proxies until they are no longer a threat to Israel or to other friends of America in this region.
Thanks, Mati. That certainly helped us better understand what's happening, what's going on in this region, and I appreciate your commentary. And to all of you, keep spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. Click on the subscribe button. Look for Yair Pinto and Mati Shoshani on our social media accounts. And make sure to hit the subscribe again on this TBN Israel YouTube channel so you never miss another Boots on the Ground report. Now, let me tell you that terrorists didn't just murder families on October 7th. They targeted Israel's most vital farms. They wanted to starve Israel into submission. Yossi's farm was gutted. His crops rotted. Across Israel, farming equipment was destroyed and workers fled the front lines. That's exactly what the enemy wanted. Israel cannot secure itself if it cannot feed itself. But Yossi, he refused to give them that victory. So many Israelis saw their farms devastated. Yossi decided that his would bloom again, but he needed help. So thanks to Leket Israel, he and farmers like him have received help from tens of thousands of Leket Israel volunteers and emergency funding. Leket Israel feeds over 400,000 Israelis in need every single week, and they do it in partnership with Israel's farmers. But these farmers now need your support. So help Leket Israel rebuild Israel's farms. Visit rebuildisraelsfarms.org right now. Again, that's rebuildisraelsfarms.org right now. Make a donation, support Israel, and help Leket Israel feed this nation. Because what I like to see is that the enemy is trying to destroy what we grow, and we double down and invest in the future. Because we know that we're here because of God and not because of ourselves. While Iranian missiles were launched towards the American bases in the Gulf, air defensive systems in Kuwait and Jordan went into action, and airports across the region shifted into emergency mode. At the same time, in southern Iran and around Tehran itself, explosions were heard again after another night in which the American military struck targets inside the Islamic Republic. And this is the question now. Was last night another round of pressure on the way to a deal, or only the warm-up for a much bigger front? Because behind the fire, behind the threats, and behind the videos of Tomahawk missiles, there is a double battle that is taking place here. One battle is in the skies, one battle is at sea, and another battle is around the bases in the Gulf. And then you have another battle that is inside the negotiations rooms between Washington, Tehran, Qatar, Pakistan, and the Gulf states. The American strikes overnight were not aimed at just one target, because according to the American statements, military surveillance and other communication systems, including air defensive sites, radars, command, and also units connected to the drone operations, were struck. That target list tells the whole story, not only to hurt Iran, but also to punish, but to build it, disconnect it, and reduce its ability to threaten the American forces and the commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz. This wave lasted several hours. Explosions were reported in Tehran, in Bandar Abbas, in Sirik, Minam, and Asiliyuach, and also around the islands and the areas close to the Persian Gulf. Some of the Iranian reports contradicted each other. In one place, they spoke about a hit on a petrochemical facility in the south, in the Pars gas field, and then tried to downplay it or deny it. And in another place, reports spoke about naval exchanges of fire near the Strait of Hormuz, while the Americans denied that their warships had been attacked. But what is clear is this: the United States did not operate only from the air. It combined air power, naval power, marines, and precision munitions. The most visible symbol of the night was the warship USS Michael Murphy, which launched Tomahawk cruise missiles towards targets in Iran. Trump spoke about 49 Tomahawk missiles, alongside the activity of fighter jets in Iranian skies. In other words, this was not the diplomatic message with smoke and with an end. This was a full military message. Iran responded quickly. The Revolutionary Guards announced attacks against the American targets in Bahrain, Kuwait, and Jordan. They claimed that 2 waves of strikes hit 18 central targets in the Ali El Salam and Ahmed Ali Jaber bases in Kuwait and at the Sheikh Issa Air Base in Bahrain. Later, they also announced the launch of 12 ballistic missiles towards the El Azraq Air Base in Jordan, a base that is also used by American forces, including a command and control center. On the ground, the picture was more complicated. Kuwait temporarily closed its airspace and delivered flights and diverted them. In Jordan, there were reports of missiles that were intercepted after being launched from Iran towards the El Azraq area. In Bahrain, sirens were heard, and the Iranians claimed that they attacked the headquarters of the American Fifth Fleet. The Americans, on the other hand, are presenting this very differently. Yes, there was an Iranian attack. Yes, there was an escalation, but there is no confirmation of the dramatic hits that Tehran is telling the world. And this is where the Strait of Hormuz enters the picture. This small place between Iran and Oman has once again become a most sensitive point in the global economy. Iran announced that the Strait of Hormuz is closed until further notice. The Iranian statement said that anyone requesting permission to pass will have to wait for further instructions from the Iranian authority that's managing the Gulf and the waterways. In simple words, Tehran is trying to tell the world that it is the one that's handing out the licenses for the region's most important energy artery. The United States immediately rejected that. U.S. Central Command claimed that commercial ships continue to enter and exit the strait. That's exactly the war of narrative. Iran wants to create the impression that the world depends on its approval. Washington wants to show that the naval blockade, the maritime security, and the strikes on the Iranian radars are returning freedom of navigation to American hands. Trump himself revealed an important detail. Over the past month, according to him, the American military secretly secured the passage of more than 200 commercial ships and more than 100 million barrels of oil through the Strait of Hormuz. This is a dramatic detail because it explains why this campaign is not only about nuclear weapons or missiles, it is also about fuel, oil prices, maritime insurance, stock markets, and the pockets of the American citizens and the gas stations. When gas prices rise in the United States, this is no longer just a security crisis in the Gulf. It becomes a political crisis back at home. And that's why Trump is trying to do 2 things at the same time. Show strength against Iran, but also show that he's not losing control over the global markets. The price of the naval campaign is already being felt. 3 Indian sailors were killed in an American strike against the oil tanker MT Stebelo, which was sailing under the flag of Palau. According to the Americans, the tanker tried to carry oil from Iran in violation of the blockade and repeatedly refused to follow the instructions of the American forces. An American aircraft fired a precision munition at the engine room. India summoned the American representative for a clarification meeting and delivered a sharp protest. And this is not a side event. Only days earlier, another tanker, the Marvex, was also struck. It also had 24 Indian crew members on board, and they were rescued safely by Oman. In other words, the American blockade on Iran is no longer staying on maps and on the briefing rooms. It's hitting ships, it is involving countries that are friendly to the United States, and it could open new friction with players who did not want to be part of this war. And if you want to understand the Middle East in real time, without slogans and without a smokescreen, this is the moment to join us. Like this video, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Follow boots on the ground so you can get the picture from the field, from the Israeli angle, before the headlines around the world even manage to settle. And while the sea is boiling, emergency is not dead either. On the contrary, diplomatic sources claim that the talk between the United States and Iran are still continuing. Because according to those sources, the sides are still exchanging messages about an initial memorandum of understanding, despite the exchange of fire. But here lies the great irony. While Tomahawk missiles are being launched from the sea, and while the Iranian missiles are being fired towards the American bases, the mediators are still talking about money, frozen assets, and a temporary agreement. One of the central issues is the release of the frozen Iranian funds. Iran is demanding between $6 and $12 billion. Washington is prepared for a gradual release of humanitarian needs, but opposes transferring the money directly into the hands of the regime. For Tehran, this is breathing room, not necessarily a comprehensive settlement, not necessarily an end to the nuclear story, but economic room to maneuver after months of war, blockade, and internal pressure. And that's exactly the problem from Israel's point of view. In Jerusalem, they look at the possible agreement and ask, is this really a solution, or just another 60 days in which Iran buys time? If it rebuilds its capabilities and it keeps the nuclear project alive, is this victory? Because in Israel's defense establishment, the assessment is that Iran does not truly intend to give up the nuclear program. It's not only a military project, it's also a national symbol, a survival tool for the regime, and the center of gravity for the entire Iranian strategy. That's why here in Israel, there is a double alert level. On the one hand, the assessment is that Iran will try not to fire directly at Israel in response to the American strikes in order not to give Jerusalem immediate justification to strike again inside Iran. On the other hand, the IDF is preparing for the possibility that this assessment could break. And at the moment, there is no change in the Home Front Command instructions. But the alert level is real. We must remember earlier this week, after the IDF strike in the Dacha neighborhood in Beirut, Iran launched missiles towards Israel. Later, the Israeli Air Force struck targets in western and central Iran, including a strike on the Karun petrochemical complex in the port city of Mashhad. Israel also struck air defensive systems. This was the first time since the ceasefire that Israel returned to striking targets like this in Iran. And in one of the latest Iranian barrages, there was a hit in the area of Ramat David Air Base, an incident that the IDF described as not significant, with no casualties and no substantial damage. But the Israeli message is clear. If Iran pulls Israel back into the circle of fire, Israel will not remain only in defense. And Defense Minister Israel Katz said that the campaign against Iran is far from over. And that if Iran attacks Israel, it will absorb a severe blow. Because according to the assessments, the IDF is already treating Iran once again as the main arena. Lebanon remains important. Hezbollah continues to take hits, but the center of gravity is returning to Tehran, Hormuz, Bandar Abbas, the radars, and the missiles arrays. Hezbollah also enters the picture. Reports from Lebanon describe the organization that has been deeply worn down, a command structure that has been hit, veteran fighters that were killed, and infrastructure destroyed in precise strikes. There are reports of minors being recruited into the organization's ranks in an attempt to fill the gaps after heavy losses. If this is true, it is an indication of deep pain inside Iran's most important arm on Israel's northern border. But here too, the story does not remain only military. Turkey is raising its tone against Israel and trying to gain status in the Arab world while Iran is weakened and isolated. Erdogan speaks about Israel as a regional danger. Trump, for his part, is calming the situation and says that there will be no confrontation between Israel and Turkey as long as he is president. Behind the scenes, this is part of the same picture. Every regional power is trying to use the war to improve its position. On the international stage, the pressure on Iran does not come only from missiles. The International Atomic Energy Agency approved a resolution requiring Iran to report its stockpile of enriched uranium and allow inspectors to verify it. The resolution passed with a majority of 21 countries in favor, 3 against, and 10 abstentions. Russia, China, and Nigeria opposed it. And at the same time, 22 countries called on Iran to stop assassination attempts and malicious activities on their own territory. In other words, even when the world feels war, it is not ignoring the Iranian behavior beyond the borders of the Middle East. Now everything is converging around the next night. Trump has already threatened that if there is no deal, he will strike again. United States Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said that the strikes, if needed, will be clear and powerful. In the American administration, they're speaking about military pressure, whose goal is not to open a full war, but to force better terms at the negotiating table. In the Pentagon, they call it coercive diplomacy. In the Middle East, we call it something simpler, speaking to Iran in a language that it actually understands, but without losing control of the fire. So the question is whether a fire like this can really be managed with precision, because every missile that leaves Iran towards an American base, every interception over Jordan or Kuwait, every hit on a ship in the Gulf of Oman, and every Iranian statement about closing Hormuz can push the region one more step forward. Not necessarily into a full war tomorrow morning, but into a situation where every side feels that it must respond, not just so it does not look weak. And that's the real danger of the next night. Not only another strike, not only another threat, but the accumulation of mistakes, pride, economic pressure, and military forces that are standing too close to one another. The Middle East is entering hours in which every small decision can become a major event. Will the next night bring an agreement under fire, or the beginning of a broader round that everyone is preparing for? So keep spreading the truth, follow us, and most importantly, do not forget to click on the subscribe button so that you stay tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another update of Boots on the Ground. Keep looking for us, Mati Shoshani, Yair Pinto, TBN Israel on our social media accounts. And the best thing that you can do is pray. Let's pray for the U.S. personnel that are involved in strikes or are under fire from the Iranian attacks. Let's pray for the people of Iran. Let's pray for the people of Lebanon. Let's pray for the people of Israel. Remember, all these headlines, all these news may sound very big and far away, but for us here, it's our daily lives. Every house in Israel has a bomb shelter. This storage room that I'm recording and filming this report for you is a bomb shelter. When the missiles fly, our team at TBN Israel come here to this room to take shelter. And this is not special because every apartment in Israel has one bedroom that is a bomb shelter. In my house, it's my youngest room. He's 3 years old, and he's been sleeping in the bomb shelter since this war began for 3 years straight. So know that this war affects real people, real lives. But we know that God cares about the individual as much as he cares about the nation. So let's pray. Let's ask him to help us. Let's ask him for wisdom. Let's ask him for peace. Let's pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.